The sun dipped low over the village of Nduma, casting golden light over the red clay homes and mango trees that lined the winding paths. It was early evening. And the smoke from hundreds of cooking fires danced lazily into the sky. Birds chirped their final songs of the day. Children ran barefoot, their laughter echoing against the hills. Life moved with the rhythm of tradition. In a modest house at the edge of the village, Mawusi, a woman in her early 40s with wise eyes and calloused hands, was preparing cassava porridge for her family. Her youngest daughter, Ifia, sat beside her, plucking leaves from a bunch of wild spinach, while the two older boys, Kojo and Kweku, hauled firewood into the courtyard. Mawusi's husband, Kwame, returned from the cocoa fields as the last light of day slipped away. He was weary, his face lined with the weight of responsibility. Yet there was pride in his stride, the kind that came from knowing he was working the same land his grandfather once did. That night, dinner was quiet but warm. The family ate together under the stars, offering their thanks to the spirits for the food and safety of another day. When the children had gone to bed and the fire had turned to embers, Mawusi stepped outside to pour libations for her ancestors. She knelt by the old ancestral stone, worn smooth by generations, and whispered the names of those who had passed on, her father, her grandmother, the old uncle who taught her how to call rain. "Protect this house," she murmured, pouring a few drops of palm wine onto the earth. "Guide us as you always have." The wind stirred. Somewhere deep in the night, an owl hooted. Mawusi returned to bed, feeling a strange tightness in her chest, an unease she couldn't explain. That night, as the full moon rose high over the village, Mawusi dreamed. She stood in the middle of the road outside her home, barefoot and dressed in white. The sky above her pulsed an unnatural blue. Everything was still, too still. No wind, no sound. Just silence. Suddenly, she saw a figure walking toward her from the far end of the path. Tall, cloaked in white and shadow, the figure shimmered, as if made of mist and memory. As it drew closer, she recognized him. It was her grandfather, the one who had died before her first child was born. His eyes glowed like embers. His voice, when it came, was neither kind nor cruel, but heavy, like a drumbeat echoing through stone. "You must not go to the market tomorrow." Mawusi tried to speak, but her mouth felt full of sand. "A shadow waits," her grandfather continued. "It is hungry. If you go, it will swallow you all." Then he raised his hand, pointing to a large tree that grew at the crossroads near the market. The tree was aflame, burning without smoke, without heat, and beneath it lay something twisted and dark, writhing like a wounded animal. "Do not follow the path of fire," he said. "Stay. And prepare." Mawusi's heart pounded in the dream. She fell to her knees, crying, trying to hold on to his image, but her grandfather was already fading into mist. And then she woke up. Drenched in sweat, Mawusi sat bolt upright in her bed. Her breath shallow, her hands trembling. The night was quiet again, too quiet. Not even the usual chirping of crickets. It was as though the whole village held its breath. She rose, wrapped a shawl over her shoulders, and went to the ancestral stone again. The air was cold. The moon, high above, glowed with a strange brilliance. "I have seen him," she whispered. "Baba Kweku. I have seen you." Her voice shook. The vision had been so real, so vivid. She could still hear his voice echoing in her mind. "A shadow waits." From inside the house, her husband stirred. "Mawu." He called groggily. She returned indoors, sitting on the edge of the bed, unsure of what to tell him. Dreams were taken seriously in Nduma. Especially dreams involving the dead. And in her bones. She knew this was not a dream to ignore. The next morning, Mawusi awoke early. A thin fog hugged the village like a second skin. Chickens scratched the earth listlessly. And not even the roosters crowed as loudly as usual. Everything felt off. She moved quietly through the house, stirring the fire, warming water, preparing millet porridge. Her children still slept, curled beneath their blankets of woven raffia. Kwame sat near the doorway, sharpening a machete, preparing for the trip to the Asuboa market, as they did every Thursday. They had planned this visit for weeks. It was market day, the day to sell cocoa, buy salt, thread, oil, and gifts for Ifia's upcoming naming ceremony. Everyone in the family was looking forward to it. But Mawusi felt a knot tighten in her gut. She sat beside her husband and took a deep breath. "Kwame," she said, her voice low. "We cannot go to the market today." Kwame stopped sharpening the blade. He looked at her. "Why?" She hesitated. "I had a dream last night. A powerful dream. My grandfather came to me. He warned me that a shadow waits for us on the market road." Kwame blinked. He had heard tales like this before, from elders and grandmothers. But this was his wife, the most grounded person he knew, speaking with certainty and fear in her voice. "Your grandfather? Baba Kweku?" She nodded. "He said there would be danger if we went." Kwame set the machete down slowly. "You think something bad will happen?" Mawusi didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood and walked to the ancestral stone again. This time bringing a bowl of water and kola nuts. She whispered a brief prayer and offered the items with trembling hands. The wind rustled through the trees. Kwame sighed deeply, torn. "But we need that market, Mawu. We've waited 3 weeks. The cocoa will go bad if we don't sell it soon." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Is money more important than our lives?" He fell silent. Just then, Ifia ran out into the courtyard, hair wild with sleep, calling for her mother. Behind her came Kojo and Kweku, already stretching and asking about the trip. Mawusi turned to her children. "We're not going today." The boys protested. "But you said we could buy the new fishing line." "I was going to trade my carvings." She raised a hand. "Not today. We must trust the ancestors." Kwame looked at her, still uncertain, but in the end, he nodded. When the mother of the home speaks from a dream, especially one sent by a known ancestor, her words are not taken lightly. They would stay. Across the village, others packed their goods and prepared their carts for the road to Asuboa market, just as they always did. Neighbors stopped by to ask why the family wasn't going. Mawusi gave only one answer: the ancestors spoke. Some scoffed politely. Others nodded with quiet understanding. After all, in Nduma, the line between the living and the dead was thin. It was not unusual for the dead to guide the living, but it was rare that they warned with such clarity. By midday, the village was almost empty. A long train of villagers had set off toward the market, winding down the dirt road, past the ancient fig tree, the very one Mawusi had seen in flames in her dream. Back at the house, silence settled over Mawusi's family. They kept busy, fixing the roof, tending to goats, boiling cassava. But tension hung in the air like smoke. Even the children sensed it, something was coming. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, drums began to beat in the distance, not the rhythmic drums of celebration, but the hard, fast, uneven beats of mourning. A boy from the next village came running down the path, barefoot and breathless. "There's been an accident," he cried. "The market road. A big truck, brakes failed, smashed into the crowd near the fig tree. Many are dead, many." Kwame stood up so fast his stool tipped over. Mawusi grabbed the edge of the doorframe to steady herself. "The fig tree," she whispered. The boy nodded. "Yes. That one. The one at the crossroads." Tears sprang into Mawusi's eyes. The shadow had come. Just as the ancestor had said. That night. As families wept and fires burned in mourning across the hills, Mawusi's family sat quietly in the courtyard. No one spoke. Even the children, though they didn't fully understand, felt the weight of the moment. Finally, Kwame broke the silence. Your dream saved us. Mawusi nodded slowly. Her hands trembled. It was not my dream, she said. It was Baba Kweku. He is still watching. Still protecting us. The ancestral stone seemed to glow faintly under the moonlight. 3 days had passed since the tragedy on the market road. Nduma had become a village draped in mourning. Smoke rose constantly from the funeral fires, and the wailing of women echoed across the hills. It was said that at least 12 people had died. Including elders, 2 children, and a newlywed couple. No one in the village could recall an accident so deadly in their lifetime. The fig tree at the crossroads, once a symbol of fortune and safe passage, was now seen with dread. Locals whispered that its roots had become polluted with death. That the tree had devoured the spirits of the living. Some refused to even walk past it. Others suggested it should be burned down. But the elders warned. It is not the tree's fault. It was the shadow that waited there. We were warned. We did not listen. In the midst of this grief, Mawusi's family was quiet, but not untouched. Though they had survived. The event weighed heavily on their spirits. The children no longer ran freely. Kwame sat outside each night, staring into the fire with a haunted expression. He had known some of the victims, friends. Cousins, a woman who used to babysit Kojo and Kweku. But Mawusi carried something deeper. She had seen it before it happened. She had felt the shadow. On the 4th day. She visited the elder diviner, a thin, hunched man named Togbi Nene who lived near the forest edge, where the village met the sacred grove. Togbi's home smelled of herbs, smoke, and rain-soaked earth. Inside, dried roots hung from the ceiling. Bones, feathers, and carved idols lined the shelves. A clay bowl sat in the center of the floor, filled with cowrie shells, ready for divination. Mawusi knelt before him, lowering her eyes respectfully. Togbi, she said. I need to understand what happened. Why my grandfather came to me. Why I was warned when others were not. Togbi studied her. His voice was old, like a tree that had seen too many storms. The spirits do not shout at everyone. They whisper to those who still listen. He tossed the cowrie shells. They landed in a scattered pattern, like stars across the floor. Togbi closed his eyes. Your blood is open, he said. You are a vessel. You saw because your grandfather still walks with you. He has not passed on fully. Mawusi felt a chill. He stayed behind, to protect. Togbi nodded. He walks between the world of the living and the world of the ancestors. But now he needs to be honored. You must go to the village of spirits. The village of spirits was not a place on any map. It was a sacred ritual site deep in the forest, a place only entered with purpose, humility, and offerings. It was said that the veil between the two worlds was thinnest there. And that the ancestors could see and be seen, speak and be heard. Mawusi knew the stories. She had never been there. But now, she must go. That night. She told her husband what the diviner had said. Kwame hesitated, uneasy with the idea of his wife going into the forest alone. But he knew better than to challenge the path the spirits laid out. At dawn, Mawusi gathered the necessary items, white cloth, kola nuts, palm wine, a rooster, and the name of her grandfather carved on a piece of calabash. She wrapped everything in leaves and tied them tightly. She kissed her children, looked once more at her home, and walked into the forest alone. The path was quiet and dark. Ancient trees arched overhead, forming a green cathedral. Birds called warnings. The wind whispered in a language she didn't understand. But Mawusi walked with purpose, guided by ancestral memory. After an hour, she reached a clearing ringed with stones. At the center stood a large, moss-covered mound, the ancestral altar. She knelt. She untied her bundle, laying out the items with care. She poured the wine. She offered the kola nuts. She placed the calabash at the base of the altar. Then she began to sing. A song her grandmother used to sing when calling the spirits. At first, there was only silence. Then the wind shifted. The leaves trembled. The temperature dropped. And in the shadows of the trees, figures began to appear, faint at first, like heat ripples. Then clearer. Faces Mawusi recognized. Old aunties. A cousin who died young. Her grandmother, eyes kind and strong. And finally, her grandfather. Baba Kweku. He stood taller than she remembered. He wore the same white cloth she had seen in her dream. "You came," he said, though his lips did not move. Mawusi fell to the ground. "You saved us," she whispered. "The shadow was not meant for you," he said. But it was hungry. The balance was broken. The blood of the ancestors was forgotten. "Why me?" "Because you remembered." The spirits moved closer. They touched her shoulders, her head. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, like fire and peace at once. Then Baba Kweku spoke again. "You must do more. You must help others remember. Or the shadow will return. Not as warning, but as judgment." The wind howled. The trees swayed. Mawusi closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the clearing was empty. The altar was wet with dew. And in the place where she had poured the wine, a small white feather rested, though no bird had flown overhead. She took it with trembling fingers, knowing it was a sign. Mawusi returned to Nduma with the feather wrapped in white cloth, pressed to her chest like a sacred relic. The forest had left her changed. She walked more slowly. Her eyes holding something deeper, ancient. Those who saw her that evening whispered, "She has spoken to the old ones." Her husband, Kwame, came to meet her at the edge of the village. He said nothing, he didn't need to. He saw the change in her face, the light in her silence. He took her hand, and they walked home in the golden hush of evening. That night, Mawusi told her family everything, the journey into the forest, the spirits she saw, and the message from Baba Kweku, a warning not just for their household, but for the entire village. "The shadow came because we have forgotten," she said. "We no longer honor the ancestors. The drums have grown quiet. The libations have grown cold. And now, something stirs in the silence we've left behind." Even Kojo and Kweku, normally restless and skeptical, listened with wide eyes. Ifia climbed into her mother's lap, clinging tightly, as if afraid the ancestors might call her away too. Kwame nodded solemnly. "Then we must remember." The next morning, Mawusi went to the council of elders. They sat under the baobab tree in the village square, men and women whose faces were carved by time and wisdom. When she had finished telling her story, there was a long silence. Finally, the eldest woman, Yamunsa, who was nearly 90 and blind in both eyes, spoke. "I remember when we used to sing for the ancestors every new moon. I remember when no child would eat before offering thanks to those who came before us. Now, they only remember their phones and the money from the city." Another elder, Uncle Tawia, grunted. "We stopped pouring libations because the missionaries said it was evil. That we prayed to the dead. And now look. The dead are not evil," Yamunsa said sharply. "They are forgotten. That is far worse." Mawusi leaned forward. "They asked me to help us remember." The elders exchanged glances. Then Yamunsa nodded. Then you must lead the cleansing. For the first time in over 30 years, the village of Nduma prepared for an ancestral remembrance ritual. It was not a festival. It was not a celebration. It was a cleansing of memory. A mending of the broken bridge between the living and the dead. Women pounded yam and millet. Men swept the sacred square with palm branches. The children were taught old songs again, songs of rain, birth, protection, and death. At the center of it all was Mawusi. She fasted. She prayed. She prepared the offerings. And when the moon was full, she led the people to the ancestral grove at the edge of the forest. There, beneath the ancient trees, every family called out the names of their dead. Kwabena Teta, who taught me to fish. Ajoa Mensa, who died giving birth to my sister. Nana Ama, who walked with one leg and blessed my cocoa fields. The names rose like smoke, carried by wind and memory. Then came the libations, water, palm wine, and oil poured onto the earth with gratitude and reverence. Drums beat softly, then louder, until the rhythm reached the marrow of the villagers' bones. Mawusi stood before the ancestral stone. She held up the white feather. You warned us, she said. We remember now. We see you. We will not forget again. And for a moment, just a breath of time, the air shimmered. A cool breeze swept through the grove. The flames of the ritual fire bent inward. And every person in that clearing felt something pass through them, a presence, warm and watching. Some wept. Others stood still, overwhelmed by the weight of the unseen. And then, it was gone. That night, no one in Nduma had dreams. Not because the spirits were silent, but because they were satisfied. The shadow had lifted. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Elders were once again consulted before decisions were made. Young men who had mocked the old ways returned to the shrine with offerings. Children were taught not just how to read and write, but how to listen, to dreams, to the wind, to the ancestors. Mawusi became known not as a prophetess or priestess, but simply as, the one who listens. Months later, as the harvest began, Kwame and Mawusi sat beneath the stars, watching their children chase fireflies in the dark. You think the shadow will return? Kwame asked quietly. Mawusi looked toward the forest, where the trees whispered secrets to the night. Not if we keep remembering, she said. Not if we keep listening. She reached into her pocket and touched the feather, now kept in a small leather pouch around her neck. As long as we speak their names, she added, they will walk with us. And above them, a breeze stirred the leaves gently, like a hand passing through time. It was early harmattan season, and the winds carried a dry chill that rustled through the baobab leaves and swept a layer of fine dust over the roofs of Nduma. The rains had passed. The harvest had been good. For a while, peace had wrapped the village in its gentle arms. But peace, Mawusi knew, was not silence. It was a pause. A breath between one message and the next. One night, as the winds moaned like distant voices, she woke suddenly. The room was cold, her skin coated in goosebumps. She sat up and listened. Nothing. No dogs barking. No footsteps. No drums. Only wind. But then she heard it, a whisper. Faint. Elusive. Woven into the air itself. Like someone calling her name from far away. Mawusi. She froze. Then it came again, more clearly now. Not from outside. Not from a dream. Mawusi, remember Efua. The name stopped her heart. Efua. Not her daughter. Not someone from the village. A name from her mother's line. Someone long dead. And long forgotten. The next morning, she went to Yamunsa, the blind elder who remembered nearly everything from the last century. Efua, Mawusi said. Do you know that name? Yamunsa's wrinkled mouth tightened. Efua Urenkiwa. Your great-aunt. Your grandmother's youngest sister. Died before you were born. Mawusi felt a weight settle in her chest. Why would she come to me? Yamunsa nodded slowly, touching the worn beads around her neck. Not all the dead are at peace. Some are waiting to be remembered. And some are calling because their stories were never told. Mawusi stared into the distance. The wind stirred again, dry, brittle, whispering. A name in the wind. That night, Mawusi returned to the ancestral grove alone. She brought offerings, as always, kola nuts, white cloth, and this time, a carved gourd bearing Efua's name. She lit a small fire. She spoke the name aloud. Efua Urenkiwa. Daughter of Akwasi. Sister of Ama Serwa. I call you. At first, only the wind replied. But slowly, the shadows between the trees thickened. The fire flickered strangely, as if bowing. Then a figure emerged, a young woman with wide eyes and braided hair. Her skin glowed faintly, as if lit from within. I was lost, the woman said. But now I am known. Mawusi swallowed hard. What do you need? Efua knelt beside her. Tell my story, she whispered. Let them know why I died. And how I tried to warn them. Let my name live again. Then she vanished, leaving behind a trail of warmth in the air and a scent of wild hibiscus. In the days that followed, Mawusi became obsessed with finding Efua's story. She spoke with old women who remembered fragments. She drowned in the river. No, she was banished. She had a gift, visions, like you. Piece by piece, Mawusi learned the truth. Efua had been a seer. A dreamer. But in her time, fear ruled the village. Her visions were misunderstood. She was accused of witchcraft by those who feared what they could not explain. One night, she disappeared. Some said she ran into the forest and was never seen again. Others whispered she had drowned herself in the river to quiet the voices in her head. Her story was never honored. Her name, intentionally forgotten. Now Mawusi understood. The warning dream about the market had only been the beginning. The ancestors were not just guides. They were witnesses. And sometimes, victims. Efua had returned not to curse, but to reclaim her truth. During the next village gathering, Mawusi stood before the people. There is someone we have forgotten, she said. And she told them the story of Efua Urenkiwa, the gifted young woman who had been cast out by fear, and who had returned to ask only that her story be known. There was silence at first. Then Yamunsa stood up, leaning on her cane. I was there, she said. I saw what was done. I was only a girl, but I remember. Tears rolled down her cheeks. We were wrong. That night, the village held a second remembrance ritual, this one for a single spirit. They sang Efua's name. They danced to her memory. A calabash with her name was placed beside the ancestral stone. And as the last song faded, the wind returned, soft, sweet, like a breath of peace. In Mawusi's heart, she knew. The story had been heard. The shadow of silence had lifted. In the weeks after Efua's remembrance, the air in Duma felt different, lighter, yet charged with something sacred. The trees seemed greener, the river flowed clearer. And the village drums, long silent, now beat softly every dusk, like the heartbeat of ancestors returning home. And then, the children began to dream. It started with Kojo, Mawusi's eldest son. One morning, as the sun stretched its golden fingers over the hills, he came into the kitchen looking pale and quiet, unusual for the boisterous 12-year-old. Mama, he said. I saw a man in my sleep. He wore white and had cowrie shells on his arms. He said, the river is thirsty. Pour for her before the full moon. Mawusi turned slowly from the fire. Did he give his name? Kojo shook his head. No. But, he looked like the painting in the shrine. The one of your grandfather. The next night, Kweku, Kojo's younger twin, had a dream too. He told his parents the same man had spoken to him beneath the old fig tree. He said the earth below the school is hiding something. Something that must be seen. Then little Ifia, barely 6, came running to Mawusi days later and whispered. Grandma came last night. She kissed my head and said to tell you not to forget her beads. Mawusi stared at her daughter. Her mother had died before Ifia was born, and the beads had been missing since the funeral. The dreams were not random. They were messages. Tasks. Memories waiting to be found. Mawusi met again with Togbi Nene, the elder diviner. The veil is lifting, he said. Your family is a bridge. The children, because they are untainted by the forgetting, are now becoming vessels. He looked up at the sky, cloudy with harmattan dust. But when children begin to dream, it is not just memory returning. It is a calling. You must prepare them. Prepare them for what? Mawusi asked. Togbi stared into the flame of the small shrine lamp beside him. For responsibility. And danger. The spirits speak with purpose. And not all spirits bring peace. That evening, Mawusi gathered her children in the hut and knelt before them. You are dreaming because the ancestors trust you, she said softly. But you must treat your dreams like sacred seeds. You must protect them. Share them only when it is time. Kojo nodded solemnly. What if we see something scary? Then you tell me. Or your father. Or Togbi. Dreams are not punishments. They are warnings. Or gifts. Or paths to healing. As the next full moon approached, the family prepared to follow the dream instructions. First, they went to the river. By its edge, they poured libations, water, wine, and crushed kola nut, and chanted prayers. Kojo knelt and dipped his fingers into the current. To the water that feeds our lives. To the spirit that carries memory. Drink and be full again. The river shimmered for a moment, just a flicker of light, like the surface rippling under a breeze. Then silence. But when they returned to the village, rain came early. Soft and steady, surprising the farmers. Next, they followed Kweku's dream. At the back of the school, beneath a withering neem tree, the family dug into the dry earth. After hours, they uncovered a bundle wrapped in tattered cloth. Inside, bones. Small. Human. And a bracelet, the same pattern as one Mawusi had once seen in her grandmother's stories. They brought it to Yamunsa, who wept openly. She was one of the abandoned, the old woman said. A child born in secret, hidden in shame. Buried without name. Her spirit must have wandered until your boy found her. That night, Mawusi led a small rite for the child. They gave her a name. Amansaya, the forgotten who now belongs. The entire village attended. The next day, the neem tree bloomed again. No one could explain it. As dreams continued, other children in the village started having them too. Some saw their great-grandfather speaking beside fires. Others dreamed of unborn siblings who had never survived childbirth. A few even heard songs sung in dialects no longer spoken in Nduma. The elders called this time the season of return. And Mawusi became the one they turned to for guidance. Not as a priestess, but as a mother of dreamers. But all was not peaceful. One night, Kojo screamed in his sleep. Mawusi rushed in. He thrashed, gasping for air, shouting. There's someone behind the tree. He has no face. He says we've opened the wrong door. Mawusi held him tightly, whispering until the shaking stopped. The next morning, Togbi Nene came urgently. "The veil has opened wide," he said. "And when light pours through, it casts shadows too." He looked at Mawusi with solemn eyes. "You must now prepare for the dark ones." The fire in the courtyard burned low, casting long, jagged shadows against the mud brick walls of Mawusi's home. The night was unusually silent, no owls, no insects, no distant drums. Even the wind held its breath. Kojo sat near the fire, eyes wide and unfocused. He hadn't spoken since the nightmare. His hands trembled, and he clutched his blanket as if it were the only thing tethering him to this world. Mawusi knelt beside him and whispered. "You are safe. Speak when you are ready." At last, Kojo turned to her and said in a voice far too steady for his age. "He had no face, Mama. But I could feel him smiling. Like he knew things we didn't." The next morning, Togbi Nene arrived at their home, unannounced and grim. He carried a bundle wrapped in red cloth, an item rarely seen in public. It was the mask of Yuvi, an artifact used only in the gravest spiritual disturbances. "The children have awakened the stream of memory," he told Mawusi. "But streams can swell into floods. And floods bring with them what the soil has buried." He unwrapped the mask slowly. It was carved from blackwood, with no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth hollowness. "The faceless one," he murmured. "The spirit of forgotten guilt. A shadow born not from evil, but from silence. He does not punish. He haunts." Mawusi felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Then why did he come to Kojo?" "Because your son listens. Because your family remembers. And the ones who remember, attract the ones who wish to be remembered. Even those whose stories are too painful to face." Togbi nodded. That night, Mawusi decided to confront the spirit. She returned to the ancestral grove, this time not with offerings, but with a question. "What must I do?" she whispered into the wind. For a while, there was nothing but the rustling of dry leaves. Then the shadows deepened, and a faint figure stepped forward, not fully visible, not quite invisible. No face. Just presence. And from the presence came a voice, not spoken, but pressed into her mind. "Tell the truth. The whole of it. Even the parts they buried. Even the parts they fear." Then the spirit vanished, leaving only silence and a single black feather at her feet. In the days that followed, Mawusi began to dig, not in the earth, but in the history of Nduma. She spoke to elders who had long avoided her questions. She visited the abandoned shrines. She listened to songs the griots no longer sang. And slowly, a buried truth began to take shape. Decades ago, during the colonial upheaval, the village had sacrificed one of its own. A girl. A duk. Accused of summoning famine through her dreams. She had predicted the burning of the yam fields, but instead of heeding her vision, the elders turned on her. She was declared cursed. Banished. Some said, killed. And her story was never spoken again. "The faceless one is not just a spirit," Mawusi told Togbi. "He is the silence that followed her death. The guilt passed down through generations." "Then it must be broken," Togbi replied. "Through truth." That evening, the entire village was summoned to the ancestral square. Mawusi stood beside the fire, her voice strong but trembling. "You have asked why the spirits have returned. You've wondered why the children now dream. I will tell you, because we have left wounds open. Because we painted over our shame with white cloth and pretended it never happened. There was a girl named Aduk. And she told the story. All of it. Not fiction. Not myth. History." Some gasped. Others looked down. Yamunsa wept quietly. She died with her name buried. Now, we speak it aloud. We remember. We ask forgiveness, not just from her spirit, but from the truth itself. They held a ritual that night, a final one. They named her among the ancestors. They poured libation not just for her, but for every forgotten child, every silenced dreamer. And as the drums beat and the fire cracked, the wind shifted. Kojo, watching from the crowd, turned to Mawusi. "Mama. He's gone. I can't feel him anymore." Mawusi touched his forehead. "Because you helped set him free." Later that night, Mawusi stood alone in the grove. The stars shimmered above like ancestral eyes. And in the distance, a whisper, not of fear, but of peace, carried through the trees. "Thank you." Weeks had passed since the night of truth. The village of Nduma felt quieter, not the tense silence of fear, but the stillness that comes after a storm. A silence filled with breath. With healing. The children's dreams had grown gentler. Kojo no longer woke screaming. Ifia sang lullabies whispered to her by unseen grandmothers in the night. Kweku had begun to draw again, images of tall women with fire in their hands and stars in their eyes. But Mawusi knew, one thing remained unfinished. The dreams had stopped, yes. But the calling had not. There was still one final task. One spirit left to be acknowledged. And she knew exactly who it was. Efua. Efua Yerenkiwa, the one who had first whispered her name in the wind. The one who had returned not to curse, but to guide. She had not asked for a shrine. She had not demanded sacrifice. She had only asked. "Tell my story." And Mawusi had done that. But it wasn't enough. Because a spirit without a place is a voice lost in the wild. And Efua, though honored, still wandered. One dawn, Mawusi went to the river's edge, where Efua had once disappeared long ago. She stood barefoot in the sand, holding a carved wooden bowl filled with white cowries, river stones, a lock of her own hair, and the calabash that bore Efua's name. The water shimmered with golden light. "Efua," she whispered. "We have not only remembered. We are ready now, to give you a home." She placed the offering gently into the river, letting it float away with the current. As it drifted, a soft breeze blew over the water. The bowl didn't sink. It spun slowly, as if dancing. And in the quiet, Mawusi felt it, not heard, but known. Peace. That same week, Mawusi gathered the villagers to build a small shrine at the edge of the ancestral grove, just for Efua. It was made of mud and stone, shaded by a fig tree, adorned with red and white cloth. No grand altar. No golden trinkets. Only a place to rest. Kojo painted her name across the shrine wall in charcoal. Ifia laid wildflowers in front of it. Kweku placed his drawings inside, a woman with fire hands and eyes of stars. And when they lit the candle that night, the flame didn't flicker. It stood tall. Steady. As if nothing could shake it. As months passed, Mawusi became known not only as a midwife, but as the one who listens. Elders came to her to recall forgotten names. Parents brought children who dreamed of the old world. Farmers even consulted her before planting, hoping for signs in the wind. But Mawusi knew, she was not a priestess, not a prophet, not even chosen. She was simply present. She had paid attention. She had listened to the silence between the drumbeats. And that, in the world of the ancestors, was everything. One night, Kojo approached her. "Mama," he said. "Do you think I'll still dream when I'm older?" She smiled. "If you keep your heart open, yes. But dreaming is not just what happens at night. It's also how you walk during the day. It's how you speak to trees. How you thank the river. How you remember names." He nodded, slowly understanding. That night, Mawusi herself dreamed. She stood in the ancestral grove. Under a starless sky. Before her stood a circle of figures, some known, some unfamiliar. All watching. Then Efua stepped forward. Her eyes glowed with warmth. Her hands no longer trembled. She wore a necklace of white stones and a crown of woven grass. "You gave me back my name," she said. "You listened when others would not. Now I give you something in return." She touched Mawusi's forehead. A flood of visions poured in, a field of yams untouched by blight, children dancing with fireflies, a drumbeat echoing beneath the earth, strong, eternal. "You have kept the balance," Efua whispered. "When the time comes again, others will follow your footsteps." Mawusi awoke with tears on her cheeks, but not from sorrow. From fullness. From completion. In the seasons that followed, Nduma thrived. There were fewer fevers. The harvests grew richer. Dreams continued, but now they brought guidance, not warnings. And the shrine of Efua? It never gathered dust. Children cleaned it. Women lit candles. Elders poured libations and whispered thanks. Not as ritual. As relationship. For in Nduma, they no longer feared the dead. They listened. They remembered. They honored. And when storms came, because they always do, they listened for the wind. For names in the silence. For ancestors who never truly left.